noche to everybody in Cyberland. It's your favorite Babalao, Olodum, or Dile Que, coming at you with another great video in order to build understanding in what is the Ifa corpus, what is the oracles, what is the word of Olodumare transmitted through Ifa, and better prepare you so you can tackle this world and you can avoid some of the pitfalls of misinformation, not knowing, etc., etc., etc. So we now are in a topic that is going to be super intriguing, a topic that is in debate before. I can't even remember how long it's been in debate. It's been in debate that long. And why? It's because there is a fundamental understanding, right? And then we begin to stray off from some of these fundamental understandings based on perspective. And I've told you, each and every one of you before, perspective is important. Because my perspective is merely one under the pretenses of Chango, under the pretenses of being an Awo Neorumila, under the pretenses of being Odirete, plus another 8 Oduns that I need to take into consideration when I build my mindset, when I center my Ori. So my perspective is just my perspective. It's not law. However, we do find that foundation is important. And we do agree in many different aspects in both traditional Isheshe and both Lukumi. Right? So I'm going to jump right in. But before I begin, thank you. Thank you each and every one of you for tuning in. Thank you each and every one of you for sharing and liking. And if you haven't, please hit the like. Please hit the share, subscribe. It's important. Why? Because I need the word to get out, guys. I need the word to get out. All right? Before I jump in, I want to make sure that we understand each other. Why is it important for you to hit the like and the subscribe? But more importantly, share. Share. Because I get a lot of people that I advise and I give guidance to. And when I hear some of the things that they tell me, I begin to have to explain philosophy to them, explain the beginning, explain the foundation, explain why things flow a certain way, right? And then the light bulb goes off to say, oh, wow, that makes total sense. Blind faith is important, but is it as important as following your Ori, your gut, allowing your eguns, your eshu, and everything push you forward so that you can be successful? Logic is important. Ori is important. Okay? Follow your intelligence, your logic. You got it. Okay? This is the reason why I want to just tell you and share that with you so you can like, share, subscribe, and keep pushing the information out. Okay, so let's jump in. Here's something I got for you guys. In debate, right, is the second half of this video. But the first half of this video is pretty understood down to the T. We talked about it in episode 1 when I was just understanding the 16 Mays, and I mentioned it again when I talked about the philosophy of the faith, right? And we're building on that, right? Because we understand who Olodumare is. We understand who Olodumare is, right? The owner and creator of things, the one who manifested things. And when we look at it, we say, wow, the man that well, not gonna say man, but the energy that manifested. God is God, right? God does not have a gender role. That's why I gotta be careful when I say things, because even I fall into some of those Western civilization pitfalls, right? So when God created the universe, we understand that there was God and there was Eshu. We get those two elements are there already, right? We understand two energies, that when light came, out of the darkness, that darkness was Eshu. So light gleams out, boom, and starts to engulf, right, the darkness, and it begins to share a space. It engulfs, but then it begins to share, right? So in modern science, what do we call that? We call that the initial expansion, right? So for those who like the science and like the Big Bang theory on how the universe was created, we almost have to understand that in this void, right, when light was created, it wasn't only created for us. And you'll hear me talk about, quantum physics. You'll hear me talk about parallel universes. Why? Because our parallel spiritual doubles exist. And if our parallel spiritual doubles exist, then there's other areas of the universe that we're truly not seeing, if that makes sense. So we got to get back down to some logical thinking, utilizing both science, astronomy, right? Have a good, solid understanding on the philosophy of the faith, understanding numerology. All these things play a massive role when we talk about the Yoruba faith. Again, these new set of videos are designed to make you critically think. Remember, so Olodumare, boom, Big Bang, Eshu. Now we have two beings. As we see how things evolved, we notice that Olodumare in our philosophy begins to tell us that, he's the owner of the universe. He's the one who's creating life. He is now the one that's creating Eromule. The Eremoles, right, were celestial powers, right? Things that had an enormous amount of power that were still trying to kind of navigate and continue to expand. What Olodumare's primary thing was to create a space that had balance between light and dark. Another reason why I say, if you think that the void of space is just black, you're talking about that Olodumare didn't reach far out, and Olodumare hasn't created other universes. You almost got to think. So you mean to tell me the all-powerful supreme being all of a sudden just poof creates our solar system and we call it quits? No. And our history shows it. But it's critical thinking that's going to guide you to your understanding. The knowledge, the understanding provides wisdom, right? There's a few patakis, especially one that comes out of Iobe Mei, or Iye Obe, right? Because that means the twins anyway. And we look at a pataki when Olórun, right, which is now the second character in this philosophical story, Olórun and Aye, which is earth, right, separate from each other. And we learn in this pataki that there was a separation, and then there was other entities at play here. So there was a famous pataki that I'll go ahead and share with you today. So humans at the beginning of time were being created out of clay. The clay was provided to Obadala. Obadala will mold, and Olodumare will breathe life. Okay? That was how humans were created. They weren't procreating, you know what I mean? There was no sexual anything. Right? But that's how humans were created. At a certain point, the humans decided to travel to Olórun, right? And ask Olórun to ask Olodumare, right? To bless them to have their own offspring. So here in this part of the pataki gets very interesting. They travel to Olórun to ask Olórun. So in that explanation, you will consider Olórun both a place and a somewhat intelligence, right? Something that can be asked something in order to be forwarded on to the Supreme Being, Olodumare. So you almost gotta wonder, and you gotta say, okay, this Olórun plays a massive role, but also plays the middleman, like the gatekeeper, right? So you try to see what is going on with this character that is considered Olórun. So throughout time, we have characterized Olórun as both the celestial resting place, kind of like a heaven, right? And then we also look at Olórun as a powerful being, right, that was created along with the Eremoles for the sake of allowing Olodumare to continue his work of expanding the universes and the celestial courts of all different types, right? So he's expanding, right? Olodumare is still expanding. He's probably still expanding today because it's infinite. It's infinite. God is incredible. God doesn't stop, right? So in that story, now we fast forward. So the humans ask Olórun. Olórun tells Olodumare. Olodumare says, okay, that's perfect. But as you guys begin to create offsprings, so I'm breathing life into humans, which gives them the capacity to travel from point A to point B, which is Olórun and Aye. You have that blessing because I have touched you with my divine breath. So he puts a couple of rules down. He says, hey, you can now create your own offspring, and you have to make sure that your offspring, because they are not going to go through the process as you went through, they're not going to be allowed to cross the bridge. Olórun place again, right? The bridge that connects Aye to Olórun. Interesting. Very interesting. In this story, we begin to kind of see that the first child is born, right? And in some patakis, we look at that first child being born onto earth as one that has no true manners, a very disobedient little kid that's now born, doesn't really listen to anyone, is running up to Olórun after Olodumare already said no. And there was a lot of confusion going on, right? The Orishas don't like it. They don't like when people are disturbing their peace. So a lot of complaints ended up happening. And ultimately, in that Padaki, we see the separation, the break of the bridge between Olórun and Aye. That's a very pivotal point in our faith when that bridge broke, because that bridge was severed, and who severed it was Eshu. Eshu being the enforcer, the one who pushes for evolution, the one who is a true no holds bar, right? Eremona. And Eshu doesn't play. Eshu doesn't play, right? So he's the one that severs the bridge. But because he's the one that severs the bridge, now when Ori is communicating with God and coming down, it is now going through Olodumare and is coming straight to earth. Now we have another problem in this philosophical story. In this philosophical story, we begin to notice that the travels of Ori that go into the mother's stomach, 9 months, right? Stomach is a representation of the world, a lot of liquid, this, that, and the other, right? Baby's born. Baby's born with an understanding of where they're going, how they're going, right? We go down this other road, which I don't want to go too much into, right? We talk about their destiny and whatnot, right? But they came down through this road, right? The road that should have been a bridge, which should have been something that could have easily just been crossed, but no, it had to go through its own process now, right? So Ori has to accompany the humans to give them consciousness and whatnot, right? Because now it's just not God breathing breath, right? These are humans that are actually doing things like we just talked about. So now this child is born. But the message went from Olodumare to the child. Here's the problem. Olórun doesn't have much say there, right? Excuse me. I like to relate this to government. I like to relate this to fraternities, private organizations, the military, right? If you received an order from your CEO of your company or the commander in chief or a general on the field, right? Are you going to listen to somebody underneath that person who's giving you an order that contradicts that order? The answer is no, you're not. So here we come into understanding why the third character in this story is revealed. Okay? Now, the third character in this story is what we call Awa Olofi, or Igba Odun, right? Or Odun, not Igba, but Odun. But referring to the superior being that blesses all spiritual houses. The spiritual being that is almost like a governor, right? When you almost got to put it into perspective, it's the governor of all those spiritual houses. Olofin is a king. Olofin is a title. Olofin is something that in Africa, when you relate and you look at the word, you look at something that is ruling, which is a good title. It's not a bad title, but what is it ruling, right? That's where it gets interesting, right? And this is where the debates begin to come in. Because Olórun, right? Olórun does not know how to manage the communication from the Orishas on earth on what is going on, what is being reported back up. So what is happening is we are creating almost a funnel effect. Olórun is getting all this data, but Olórun cannot answer most of this data because he's been bypassed by the big man because Ori is coming straight down. The only one that is seeing that process is Eshu, who severed the bridge between Earth and Olodumare, or Olórun, right? So now we come into these predicaments, and we come into that third character, Olofi. And we begin to see that because there was a bottleneck of information going up to Olórun, and Olórun had to keep going back up to the big man. Hey, big man, this person is saying this. Can we do this? Okay. Hey, big man, this person doing this and doing this. Okay. And Olodumare was not being left in peace to do his creator, what his mentality was on how he wanted to create the rest of the infinite universes, right? So Olodumare says, you know what? We're going to change some things, right? Olórun, you exist in order to keep the Eremoles informed on my orders, and we keep the celestial space right. And let me disclaimer here, a lot of this is now my studies, a long time of studies, decades of studying, where I feel that this is the process that is best understood for those who are coming into this faith so that you can be better informed. So Olodumare says, Olórun, you're in charge. You're in charge of everything the way I left you. I'm not going to change that. But I am going to put something else in charge so that now you are not bogged down with just Aye, because I need you focused on the Eremoles. I need you focused on the celestial powers that are running around. I need you to manage the moon and whatnot, right? The planets, everything that's going on. But I need you to be focused on those aspects, the stars and the constellations. I need Olórun to be focused on big picture. So now the third character, Olofi, now becomes the third, right? The trifecta, the no kidding, the Trinity, right? Which we see a lot of in a lot of different faiths. Do the research on different types of religion, and you're going to begin to kind of see what the number 3, right? When we talk about Eshu, Elewa, when you see the number 3, we talk about Trinities, when you see the number 3, it's a very significant number in a lot of things that we do, right? So, okay, now let's continue the story. So now Olórun is now off the hook because this being called a Olofi is now on the hook. to manage everything in Aye. So Olodumare has blessed Aye with having its own Eremuli overseer on the earth. So now things get simple. Now, who is Awa Olofi? I told you that he's kind of like a governor, right? And the president of the earth would be like, we'll call Olórun the federal government, and we call Earth, and Awa Olofi like a governor, a state governor, right? Here's the state, and then here we got the president, right? And then Olodumare is just he's just God Almighty. He owns everything. So we look at these supreme beings, and you begin to ask, okay, so we get into certain concepts that we need to understand, like the Eremolis and the Orishas, and when God created 200 and 200. Some people say 400, 400. Some people say 400 and 200 of the Eremolis, these celestial beings, right? And we begin to kind of see where a lot of this has to do with balance. Remember when I started this video, I said Olodumare expanded light from the dark, and then it found balance. Olórun is another aspect that we look at as the sun. The sun, so far Olórun has taken almost 3 different postures: as the sun, as the heaven, right, the celestial resting grounds or home, right, and then we got the second in command to Olodumare in order to manage the Ache, the celestial Ache. So when we begin to look at that, I say, you know what? Wow, this has some truth to it. Why? Because the sun is complemented, right, by what? Right, by what? The sun provides what? And you begin to kind of piece it together. And then you start looking at the old dunes and you say, man, in Otura Mei, we talk about a ceremony called Nangareo, right? When we give homage to the sun, right? And we go down with the Salam Alaikum, Alaikum Salam, Nangari, Nyare, Ifa Male, and we look at the sun, right? And when we do that, it's very important for us to understand that we are giving homage to the sun, but why? It's always the why that I like to kind of focus on. Well, it's because it's Olórun. We're recognizing the life-bringing element that the sun brings down. Thank you, Olórun, right? So then we look at the sun and we look at patakis like the one when Ochun changed to a bird and flew up to save mankind from the drought. And where did she go? And she almost burned in the pataki. Burned. Why? Because she got too close to the sun. So was she flying into the sun? Those are things that, critically thinking, you have to begin to piece together and bring the story together. Right? Very important. Then we have to almost look at different aspects. So if the sun is the life bringer in this element, is there not a balance to the sun? Can we say that the moon and the several moons that surround different planets serve as a balancing opportunity for the sun? Maybe. For those who follow science and follow the new technology that's in outer space and the different satellites, right, and the different Hubble telescopes, and they're beginning to learn how to read energy differently in outer space, right? It's not as simple as just looking at outer space. It's looking at the energy and the UVs and the solar flares and what is going on and why. And now they begin to kind of see that there is a dark side to the sun, right? There is almost like a doppelganger of the sun, which makes sense in our faith. Why? Because as we see the second sun that can't be seen through our eyes, maybe that sun is the balance. But we're not going to get into that because those are all very, very much scientific theories that are going on now within the science community, which is great, in the physics community, which is great, right? So I like to share another pataki. because it's important to understand the balances, right? We talked about Olodumare and we talked about Eshu. We talked about Olórun and we talked about how the moons, because even the moon is considered an eremole, right? So if the moon is considered eremole and the sun is considered eremole, and let's say Olórun is not the sun, right? He's still being managed. We still have balance even in outer space, which is crazy. It's beautiful. The sun provides us the right amount of light in order to what? To produce agriculture, life. It changes moods, right? But we have to be conscious of those things. So the sun plays a massive role on our earth. So then we look at Awa Olofi. Awa Olofi, who is your double? Well, we begin to look back at the character we mentioned, Eshu. Eshu severed that bridge between Olórun now and Aye, right? And he understands and he sees it all because Eshu is all things. Eshu is everywhere. Eshu has the ability of transformation. Eshu is the enforcer. Eshu doesn't see right or wrong. Eshu sees we will push the envelope forward any way possible. If you don't do your ebo, I will make sure that I see, I act, I react in order to make the end result based on what is that grand plan, that grand architectural plan, right? What did the grand architect truly design for us to move forward with? So let's dig into that a little bit now, right? So while Olofi was challenged, right, or better yet, balanced, right, its other side by something called Abita, right? And Abita is another serious character that I'm not going to talk about because that's separate. Because what I want to focus on now is just the Trinity, right? Understanding Olodumare, where Olórun's role is, and now where's Awa Olofin's role in this whole thing? Awa Olofin being the governor of all spiritual houses. When you do something wrong in a spiritual house, or you scam somebody, or you did an ebo wrong, or you did an initiation wrong, or ceremony wrong, it's not going to be the aleyo or the aborisha that's going to suffer. Those ceremonies happen, those initiations happen under the light of Olodumare, and Olofin governs that. Now, certain things, yes, we must repeat the ceremony. However, it does not go without getting knocked out, getting written down, right? And who takes care of that? But Eshu. So Eshu is the balance and the enforcer of also Awa Olofin. Why? Because in the grand scheme of things, Eshu is the enforcer of everything that Olodumare creates out of the darkness, which is everything. So it is in very strong opinion that Eshu Abita is a thing, right? So Eshu is now the balance to Awa Olofin. So we have a pataki. So in this pataki, we talk about how Olofin, right? And we talk about how Olofi and Abita sit on the same table. And they begin to challenge people on this earth. We heard in one pataki when it was Babalu Aye, where it was his character that made him ascend to the Orisha that he is today. Why? Because he died, but when he died, he went through things. But he went through things based on celestial and Orisha effects. Why? Because in the story that I refer to, Abita punished Babalu Aye, right, with plagues and sicknesses and all types of things in order to challenge his faith. And Babalu Aye never broke. And he maintained firm to his faith. And even though when he was at his worst, he always said God has a plan. And if God willing, this is what it is. Another beautiful story. We also talk about another story where Abita, right, sat on the table with Awa Olofin. And we all understand that Eshu has the ability of transformation. That's an important part because in this story, it's Elewa who's servicing that table, right? And Abita and Elewa are just two passive Eshu. Eshu became an Orisha on this land when he manifested and he sent a piece of his energy down here, which was then created this Orisha Eleua. Right? That's how interesting the stories of Eshu can get. But we're not going to get into that particularly. But in this Pataki, we talk about how Olodumare and Abita sit on the same table. And that comes out of the story of Osara Fobeo. Right? Osa Obe. And when they sit on the table, it's Elewa that is trying to wonder, like, man, wow, Olofi, you're all great, you're all pure, you're all white. You know what I mean? You have the power. Why do you sit with this thing that is all negativity and it's all, very, very abrupt nature? And the ending of that story was that Olofi recognized the balance that is necessary in this world. The balance that is necessary for everything. The balance that is necessary between male, female, right, wrong, positive, negative, yin, yang, sun, moon, Olodumare, Eshu. All these things matter. And in that story, very important story, I just wanted to make sure I shared that. And then you have many other stories where we talk about in Ogunda Orbe, Ogunda Verde, we have more Orisha stories that talk about how in God's eyes, Chango and Ogun are the enforcers, but it took certain levels of layers of understanding through those patakis, right, where Olodumare creates, Olórun plays a role, right, as a place and a communicator, and it always ends up, and in this case, Ogun and Chango become the left and right hand of a Olofi. The Orishas now become the worker bees and the helpers to humans through a Olofi, which reinforces more on the Olofi aspects of things. Right? So we look at Olodumare, we're going to recap. We look at Olodumare as the supreme being. We look at Olodumare created Olórun. And we look at Olodumare also created a Olofi, allowing and breaking up the power to say Olórun is going to worry about Eremoli, a Olofi is going to worry about Orishas and Aye, because at a certain point Olórun and Aye were severed, and that information became very bottleneck. And in order to keep everything going properly, we had to create a system. Olodumare and his infinite wisdom created a system. And that's one version of that philosophical standpoint. That is my philosophical standpoint. And that's okay, right? Because there will be others out there that don't recognize necessarily the Olofi aspect, because we had a lot of kings on the ground that manifested and they were reincarnated and they became Orishas, right? That governed properly in Africa. And I recognize that as well. And I recognize in Lokumi that we look at a Trinity aspect of things, because we also have a lot of understanding of world religions. We don't necessarily persecute all the other religions right away. And that has built, I think, in my mind, it has challenged me to look outside the lens of just Yoruba culture, but all cultures, like an Ikafun dictates. So, with that said, I said a lot. We're at 34 minutes now, and I don't want to drag this out further, but I hope you gain something from this. The understanding of Olodumare, Olórun, and Olofi in the side of Lokumi. In the side of Yoruba, we look at Olodumare, all supreme, and Olórun as a place, as the sun, right, for the Yoruba faith. Two different aspects, but they both agree on Olodumare and Olórun. And with that said, Iburu, Iboya, Ibucheche, Cyberland, much love to each and every one of you. Hope you have a blessed day. And again, keep sharing, keep moving out, keep learning, and every day is an adventure, my friends.